So when I was about 26, I worked at a hospital. I worked anywhere from 6:30 in the morning till almost 8 p.m. at night. And sometimes it used to get late, in case I got called in for some extra duty. And before I tell the incident, I need to provide you with some background on the hospital. It's right next door to a quite popular college campus, which draws a lot of people to it. Mostly students, and others too for exploring the campus as tourists. Also, there are some houses just behind the hospital, past the parking lot that is for the employees. Although the hospital isn't in a bad neighborhood, there have strangely been a few different gruesome crimes in that area. Once a man brutally killed his wife behind the hospital and then tried to kill himself. To this date, no one knows as to why he did it there. It's a total mystery. Neither of the two worked at the hospital, nor did they work in any hospital-related jobs. It would have made sense if either of the two worked as a delivery agent and ended up here while on their job, but that wasn't the case. And this was just one of the many crazy stories from here. There was this another time in one of those houses behind the hospital when a man was found stabbed to death in his basement, and his killer was never found. And unfortunately, the main employee parking lot is very close to where both of those crimes had taken place. About 10 years ago, a new hospital had been constructed in front of the old one, but the old one wasn't torn down for many years. So it just sat there abandoned and empty. There used to also be a tiny little parking lot directly in front of the aforementioned old hospital that, despite its close proximity to the creepy building, it was in high demand. This was so because it was just a short walk to the employee entrance from there. The building was not just creepy because it was abandoned. It really looked creepy to the core. I had two creepy encounters there, one in that small little parking lot, and one in the big main parking lot. Now let me jump to the very first story. On one particular night, I had gotten done at 6:30 in the evening. But it was during the winter season, so it was pretty dark outside. I had parked in the large main parking lot, but I was in a pretty far away spot. I was close to the houses that run behind the hospital. Now I had a real legit stalker from the time I was 18 until at 24, so I was always on edge whenever I was walking alone at night, especially in these sorts of situations. That being said, it was just past 6:30, so it was pretty early, which is probably why I let my guard down a little bit. As I was walking toward my car, I saw this dude walking in front of the houses, and I just assumed that it was a college student, or maybe someone living around who was out for a walk in the evening. And actually, a lot of college kids used to rent those houses, mainly because of their proximity to the campus. So it wasn't uncommon to see people moving around out late at night. But on that particular night, this person was the only one out, and what kind of set off some alarm bells in my mind was that he was wearing all black from head to toe. Also, he had a stocking cap. It was cold that night, but not so cold that one would need to wear a stocking cap. So that seemed a little weird to me, but despite that, I told myself it was nothing. As I approached my car, this guy stopped walking as soon as he noticed me, turned to face me, then watched me for a couple of seconds, and then charged in my direction. He had been walking at a leisurely pace up until that point, but when he saw me and changed direction to come in my direction, he wasn't entirely running, but he was walking extremely fast. I sprinted to my car, unlocked my door, threw all of my stuff inside, locked the doors, and turned the car on. All of this happened so quickly. From the time he saw me to the time I got in my car, it had to be only about 10 to 15 seconds at most. I knew time was precious at that moment, so I didn't waste any time and put the car in drive. But before my car could move, I heard the guy bang on my car window. And I was too petrified by the sudden turn of events, so I didn't look at him directly. Instead, I saw him out of the corner of my eye. Honestly, I didn't look at his face, but I did notice a sinister grin spread on one side. I did not bother to interact with him or threaten him by calling the cops. All I did was speed out of the parking lot. When I looked behind me from the mirror, he was just standing there where my car had been. He kept grinning and staring at me. And I mean literally at me. It felt like he was looking at me through the rearview mirror. And it made me uncomfortable, as if he was staring into my soul. I took the exit. And now the route kinda goes around the parking lot, but from the outside. The wall is not so high, but the pillars in between blocked my view of his. And I swear I saw him disappear and appear every time a pillar blocked my view. And somehow he kept turning to face me. Also this time I noticed that he was tall. And quite unnaturally at that, like a slender man maybe. The grin and the stare were constant. A car's sudden horn made me flinch. I was about to drive in the oncoming lane. I took a deep breath as my car stood still for a moment. I realized that I had to focus on the road. Before taking off, I just glanced to the side, and he was gone. Just vanished into thin air. And there were no other cars near mine. So he could have not gone and hidden behind some car. And the parking lot was large. So he could have not even made the exit. I started to panic again, and just decided to bolt my car as far as possible. I did not stop until I got home safely. I didn't end up telling the security officers about it. Although now, I realize that this was a massive oversight on my part, and normally I probably would have. I was just so shaken that it didn't even occur to me until later. Luckily, no one was attacked in the area that night. But I sincerely hope that it was a crazy human, and not what I think it was. The other creepy encounter happened in the other smaller parking lot. I had been called into work, so it had got later than I would have usually been there. Maybe around 10 p.m. at night. Now I had always got weird vibes from the old hospital. It just had that kind of vibe to it. But I figured that it was just because, it was this creepy abandoned hospital with dark windows. And I somewhere felt that the look of the abandoned hospital had a major influence on my perception of this place. But I was aware that literally, anyone could be in there, squatting or hiding inside, planning something nefarious. And I learned that for a fact on this particular night. I had parked in the small parking lot and had just started walking to the hospital when I heard something unusual behind me. It sounded like was someone talking. Although I didn't hear what the person said, it was enough to stop me and listen closely. The person spoke again, and this time he said, "Hey!" It sounded like he was calling out to get my attention and not just greeting me. That was it, but it was a bit clearer this time, and I could tell it was coming from behind me. But behind me meant that it was in the direction of the creepy old hospital. I turned around and didn't see anyone. The parking lot was kinda deserted. But for some reason, I looked toward this door near where I parked, which had a large window in the top half. All of a sudden, someone popped up into view through that window. Apparently, some guy that had been crouching inside the old hospital and behind the door, just so that I couldn't see him. This obviously scared the shit out of me, but I was so shocked that I just stood there frozen. The guy called out again.
"Hey, you! Come over here."
And he motioned for me to come over there. Now, since I am a rationally thinking person, I did not even bother to go over there to find out what this guy wanted, but instead literally ran to the main hospital. And this time I did tell the security officer about the incident. They called the police, but they never found anyone in there, though to be honest, I am not sure how well they looked. After that, I never parked there again. One day I asked the officer about the incident. Mainly, I wanted to know if the creep was put behind bars. He just looked at me awkwardly and said that they never found anyone there. And worse, there were no footprints either. I tried to defend my claim there and told him that I wasn't imagining things. He signaled me to calm down and told me that he believed me. He stated that the only reason why my one single complaint led to the hospital calling the cops directly was because I wasn't the only one who experienced it. There were many such concerns raised by other employees who had seen or heard things from inside. At times the hospital sent its security officers to go and check the place. They too never found anything. Getting a little nervous, he told me about one time 2 officers had gone to check it out in the middle of the night. One stayed at the door while the other went in to check. And he never returned. An entire search party was put to work and there was no trace of him. There were footprints on the entrance, but no footprints on the inside at all. It was presumed haunted, but they made sure that the rumor did not spread around. It was closed shortly thereafter because they finally decided to tear the old hospital down. Now I am more than assured that the first encounter with the creepy guy was connected to the haunted building. So yeah, I'm still very cautious when walking to my car in any parking lot, but especially there. If you enjoyed listening to this story, leave a like down below. And now before I begin reading the next story, I want you to subscribe to Mr. Scare for regular horror podcasts. I remember this one time when I got off late from work. It was probably around 11 p.m. The night was chilly, so I did not waste a single moment and simply rushed from the office building towards my car. It was parked on the far side of this parking lot. And you may wonder why I parked far away. So the thing is, this parking lot is near multiple office buildings. So it gets crowded up really quickly. So in the morning, when I arrived here to park, the spots closer to my office were all taken up by other cars. But by the time I was leaving, it was late. So there were hardly any other cars remaining in the space. I rushed to the car and got inside it. I turned on the heater and started keeping things in place. I might have OCD issues because I like to organize the items in my car before I start the drive. So I put everything in place and then checked my phone for any important messages. There were none. So I put it on maps and checked that the time shown to reach home was around an hour. I was kinda surprised because it didn't make any sense to me. I live like 20 minutes away, and the route was all green, so there was no traffic on my way home. Despite that, it showed an hour to get home. I shrugged it off as some sort of a glitch and adjusted the mirrors. I switched on my headlights and gasped. A man was lying on the floor right in front of my car. He just laid there, frozen like a statue with his back facing up and his head turned the other way. My heart started pounding. I was just about to get out of my car to check on him, but then I stopped. Instead of getting out of my car, I locked the door. And I even ensured that the other doors were locked and the windows rolled up. I took out my phone and dialed 911. I told them about the situation, and the lady officer claimed that a patrol unit was nearby and it was coming to my destination. I waited inside the car and tried to look at the man closely. He was in a very different attire than what you expect to see in my city. And the most absurd thing was that it felt like he was coming from a costume party or from some time in the past. He lay there, motionless and still. I tried to look around to see if anyone was lurking around, but I could spot no one. It might sound like an easy task to simply wait for the cops to arrive. But imagine sitting 10 to 15 feet away from a presumably dead person. For once I had accepted that he must be dead. But then the thought of him suddenly standing up literally launched shivers down my spine. Also, I believe in ghosts, etc. I was always picturing his spirit staring at me from the side window, watching me watch his body. The next 15 minutes felt like an hour, but the cops finally arrived. I got out of my car and explained the situation to them. And I am not making this up. The moment the officer tapped his shoulder, the dude sprung up. As in, he shot up and stood erect within seconds. And he bolted out of view. He ran at an inhuman speed. The cop took 2 steps in his direction and stopped in his futile attempt. He and I both knew that it was physically impossible to chase him. We just stood there in dismay, trying to process what had just happened. The officer was rattled and looked visibly shook. He used some cop lingo to inform his other officers on duty. But I wonder if anything ever came of it. Oh, and yes, we immediately went to check the camera footage. There were multiple cameras there, and it took another 10 to 15 minutes to find the right footage. And trust me, there was no one lying on the floor. Had it been just me, I would have tested my mental health. But both of us had seen him or it. And the camera footage just never captured the guy. We could see the officer going down on his knees to tap on his shoulder. We could see us reacting to him. But in the footage, it looked like we were talking to an invisible guy. The officer accompanied me home. He asked me to not spread this incident much, to avoid mass hysteria. Additional patrol units were assigned near the parking space, and I made sure that I had someone to accompany me whenever I got late to leave from work. And one more thing, the entire thing made me get home 40 minutes later than usual. Yes, it took me exactly an hour to get home, precisely what my phone had suggested when I got in the car, in the first place. All in all, it was a very creepy and mysterious day. And I am glad that I never experienced or encountered anything similar ever after. One late evening, 5 or 6 of us headed off to hang out after a long time. We parked in the very furthest corner of the parking lot, against the curb. On the other side of the curb was a long patch of grass, and on the other side of that was an expanse of woods. And we were heading to a hotel near it. Now I had thought that I would be returning to the car with the other 3 girls with whom I had ridden, so it didn't really matter that it wasn't the safest place to park. I mean, I knew that I would be in a group, so nothing to worry about. On this particular night, I was ready to get home, take a bath, and go to bed. So, after confirming that the girls who had ridden with me could find alternate ways home, I left alone. So that meant that I had to walk to that not-so-safe spot alone, and that was too late at night. I left the crowded hangout spot where we were chilling and walked past the crowded patio area. Then I walked past the crowds of people that were out front. I got to the parking area and I kept walking past the busy parking lot where lots of people were coming and going. After a minute or two, I walked down a not-so-crowded road and eventually arrived at the completely desolate parking lot where we had parked my car less than 2 hours before. I remember walking through that parking lot, holding my purse in one hand and a glass of wine in the other. I literally remember speaking to myself, this is the perfect place to get attacked or robbed. In retrospect, I might have been a visionary. I still wasn't scared, because I had assumed that it was the perfect place for someone else to get attacked or robbed. I mean, of course, these things don't happen to us. So I got to my car and fumbled around in the dark for my keys. After a long struggle, I finally found them. And being the clumsy chick that I am, I dropped the keys down. While I'm fumbling, I heard footsteps in the distance, so I turned around. I saw a guy running towards me. I still wasn't scared, to be honest. I was either the bravest chick alive, or the dumbest, I'm not sure. I remember just being curious about the guy. I kept wondering what the heck did he want from me? Did I leave my purse inside? And was he bringing it out to me? So I just stood there, eyes squinted, trying to figure out who he was and what he wanted. He finally got close enough, such that I should have been able to see him, but I couldn't. Because he slaps one hand over my eyes, the other over my mouth, and tackles me to the grass in front of my car. The next minute and a half or so are somewhat of a blur, but I do remember bits and pieces. As I struggled to scream for help, I managed to overpower him and pin him to the ground for a brief moment. He was easily going to push me over. But he looked behind my shoulder and his eyes almost burst out of shock. I was so happy and relieved that someone had shown up to help me. And now he would be in massive trouble. The man started stuttering out of fear. He begged for forgiveness, shoved me on the side of the road, and ran for his life. But no one followed him or chased after him. I was dumbstruck. I turned around to see what they were doing. But there was no one there. I was taken aback. I did not know how to react. I clearly remember him reacting to someone behind me. But at the same time, I never heard him or her. Also, considering the position in which they must have been, I should have been able to see a long shadow in my peripheral vision. But there was none. I was probably saved by something supernatural. Or it was some sort of his conscience in the form of a hallucination. Whatever it is, I am thankful for it. Henceforth, I have been extremely cautious in such places. And I park in crowded spots only. A couple of years back, I remember that was a bright Friday afternoon. I was done with my day's work at lunchtime itself, and I was looking forward to the weekend. My commute from my home to my workplace is 50 to 60 miles, so I did not feel like waiting till I got home to have lunch. I mean, I was really hungry, and I did not want to get home in a cranky mood. So I decided to go to a chain grocery and get a sandwich. Now, since it was a beautiful autumn day and sunny, but at the same time the air was crisp and the temperature was cool, I was going to sit in my car, eat my sandwich, drink my Coke, and enjoy a new book that I had purchased very recently. I parked near the back of the parking lot, and after getting my food and returning to my car, I opened my car door. I opened it mainly because the sun was shining, and even though it was cool outside, it was a little warmer inside my car. I was not too concerned or worried about anyone bothering me, since this city has a low crime rate, and this grocery store was in a good neighborhood, but I still would frequently look in my mirrors and kind of glance around, just to be on the safe side. I had just done a quick scan around the parking lot and did not see anyone, and upon returning my attention to my book, I heard a male voice say,
"Excuse me, miss."
I looked up and there was a guy standing there. He was standing at the end of my open car door, and it gave me a weird vibe, because I had, just as I said, scanned the parking lot and had not seen anyone. My first assumption was that he was homeless, and I was expecting him to ask for spare change. Now, just so you know, I have been approached by homeless people before too, and I have never had a problem with any of them. Anyway, this guy was pretty big and chubby, but muscular too. He looked like he could be on a football team. He was probably around 6 feet. He had blonde hair on his shoulders and looked a little scruffy and unkempt, and he wore a black backpack. He said,
"My father just died in Kentucky. Someone told me that there is a rescue mission over on Tennessee Street, and they would buy me a bus ticket to get home."
Oh, and to avoid any confusion, I live in Florida, and the city that I was in had streets named after states. I assumed he was asking me for directions. So, I replied that Tennessee Street was only about half a mile over. I then pointed that way and gave him directions, and explained that I was not really much familiar with that area. And I also mentioned that I didn't know where the actual place was that he was looking for, but I did know the street that he mentioned. I assumed he would then leave, but he didn't. He repeated the same story again about his father dying, then the free bus ticket and the rescue mission, etc. I found myself repeating the directions, and once again telling him how I was unfamiliar with that area. After our second verbal dance, it began to dawn on me that he was dropping a major hint that he wanted me to offer him a ride over to Tennessee Street. Now, I was not meaning to be uncaring, but I don't give rides to strangers. Then he repeated himself a third time, and while I again found myself repeating the directions for him, I noticed his jaw tensed, his eyes narrowed, and he began to take a threatening stance. He was becoming angry and hostile. I quickly looked around, and the only people in the parking lot were an elderly lady and a bag boy gathering the grocery carts, and they were both several lanes over and toward the front. Meanwhile, I was near the back of the parking lot. It was just me and this guy who was obviously having a serious problem with me, and I was not taking the bait and offering him a ride. For reference, I'm female, 5 feet 5, and 130 pounds. So, of course, he had some pounds, height, and muscle advantage over me, and it suddenly dawned on my naive small-town girl self that he could just shove me over and get in my car with me, and I might not be able to get away. My keys were in the bottom of my purse, and my driver's side door had a broken lock, so staying in the car or just shutting the door real quick and leaving was not an option. Before things could go further, I made my decision. I was not going to be trapped in my car. I quickly grabbed my purse, jumped out, and got on the other side of my car before he even had time to think about it, and being the sweet southern girl I am, I turned to face him as I backed away and told him I was sorry to hear about his father and wished him well, but I just remembered something I needed to buy in the store. I turned and did not walk, but ran back into the store. I made sure to come out when there were plenty of people in the parking lot and he was not there. So I rushed to my car and sat inside. I checked if there was anything missing from the car. I searched and looked around closely, but he had not taken anything. I finished my search and heard a knock on the window. He was there again, standing tall and with the same facial expressions. Mind you, at least an hour had passed away. He repeated the same story. I was paranoid. I did not know what to do or say. Although this time, there were other cars parked near me. Near me as in within safe distance. So in case he forces his way inside the car, I could just scream for help. But apart from getting a little aggressive, he did not do anything. As if he wanted some sort of permission for his conscience. I told him that I could not help and asked him to go away. He did not budge. Just stood there, plainly looking at me. Maybe seemed a little pissed off. And I did not want to risk anything. I jumped out of my car and rushed to the nearest car, which had a family stuffing groceries in their trunk. While panting profusely, I told them about everything. They listened closely and the husband asked me to not worry. All this while, I was turning my head back and forth to see where the man stood. And at all points, he was just there, near my car's door. I told them everything I could. Mainly that he did frighten me, and he was obviously not going to go away. Then, there was the issue of his becoming angry with me, which in itself was scary. The whole time he and I were talking, I could not understand why he did not just go ask someone else for a ride, but he seemed determined that it was going to be me. The husband asked me where he was right now, and I pointed at him. At this point, I did not care if I offended the creep. Before the husband could say anything, the wife asked,
"Where exactly?"
I pointed at my car, which was hardly any distance away. The husband added,
"Next to this car, right? I don't see anyone."
I was dumbfounded. He was standing right there. But they were either pretending to not see him, or I was actually hallucinating. But had they been pretending, neither of their actions would have given off. I mean, their reactions looked natural. And that spooked me to the core. Either I was going crazy, or it was a ghost that was going to make me go crazy. I requested them to walk me toward my car and stay until I took off. I slowly walked while trying to not have any eye contact with the entity standing right beside my car. I got in and started the engine. I took God's name and pressed the gas. The spirit did not follow me. I did not even care to look back before I exited the parking lot. It was creepy. I was scared to the core. And I never parked at the far end of any parking spot after that incident. Even in crowded spots, I am a lot more careful and really don't sit in my car in a parking lot and read anymore. So this happened when I was waiting for a friend to arrive at a designated parking spot. It was late in the evening, maybe around 7 or 8 p.m. And it gets dark quite rapidly in North Carolina. My friend and I were supposed to head to my stepdad's farmhouse in the country. I had been there before, and I was pretty excited at the thought of chilling with my bestie in the serene location. We also enjoyed driving in general, so we decided to try night driving for the first time. I knew the route well, so there weren't going to be many issues. So I finished my job and directly headed to the spot where we had decided to meet. It was a parking lot near a school. By the time I reached there, the school was closed, and that was quite obvious. There were a handful number of cars parked in the area, but that too quite far off from one another. The trees made long shadows, and there was deafening silence all around. It was around 6:30 p.m. and my friend was supposed to arrive at any moment. I hung outside the car for a while, but it was getting quite chilly out there. So I decided to get in. After about 15 to 20 minutes, I started to get a little restless. Now mind you, this was around the early 2000s when smartphones did not exist, and I did not have a cell phone. I had money to use a phone booth, but I could not spot one anywhere around me. Now I would have not worried much, but my friend was hardly ever late. So I assumed she might be stuck at work, and I continued to wait. As I was trying to use my eagle's vision to spot her in the far-off distance, my eyes landed on a human-like figure near the trees. From where I watched him, it looked like he was unusually tall and slender, had long arms, and was almost camouflaged near the lining of the trees. For a moment, I even felt that I was imagining things. You know, as a kid we all imagine the wooden linings on the ceiling to look like ghost-like figures. So in a similar way, I assumed that I was imagining things that weren't there. although the figure did not sway even a little bit when the wind pushed the trees to bend a little. I did not bother much and rather focused on myself. I snacked a little on the chips that I had carried. The radio was jittery and it was a little annoying. Almost after 30 to 40 minutes of waiting in the same spot, I saw the silhouette of a lady walking toward my car. My eyes shined as I could guess by her figure. It was my friend. I flicked my lights on and off a couple of times to signal her. She waved at me and my eyes widened as I could clearly see the figure turn its head toward my car. Maybe the light flickering constantly caught his attention or irritated him. But more importantly, it was a living thing. Perhaps a human or an alien or a cryptid. I tried to act as if I didn't panic and calmly waited for my friend to approach my car. My eyes were fixated on the figure to see if he moved closer to us. But he didn't. He just stood there with his neck angled towards us, watching us. My friend opened the car door and apologized for the delay. I think she said something along the lines of her boss giving her some additional work. But I was too invested in the figure to even care about it. Once she was settled in, she noticed that I was not in my zone and asked what was the matter. I pretended to be as casual as possible because I did not want to alert the creature that I had noticed it. I gently told her to not react much, but to see right in front of the car near the right side of the road, next to the tree line. I clearly mentioned it to her to not react to it and tone down her body language even if she noticed something creepy. But my friend, being the typical blondie, pointed towards it while trying to locate it. I rolled my eyes as she evidently pointed at it. It didn't move, so I was pretty calm about it. Because I was ready to floor my vehicle to run from it, or come worse, even run over it. I told her that I'll be looking straight while we would be driving past it, so make sure that you look at it closely from the corner of her eye. She nodded and I pressed the gas. I did not speed up much because I wanted to know what the heck was it. There was still a possibility that we were over-imagining the situation. As I slowly reached up to it, my friend whispered in a panicky voice,
Drive fast! Quick! Do not stop!
I floored my car and the tires made a screeching sound. I started sweating and suddenly I could hear my friend laughing next to me. She told me that she was pranking and that she saw literally nothing. I stopped the car to give her a scolding for the stupid prank. She jokingly apologized and I started the car again. However, in the rearview mirror, I could see something moving. It was moving from the footpath to the road right behind me. I screamed loudly as I saw the same creature walking behind the car in the most unsettling way. It was limping or walking very slowly, but smoothly, as if it was gliding on the floor. I raced my car outside the lot and my friend kept on saying that there was nothing behind us. But I was sure that I wasn't imagining things. I could not see his face because he was too tall, and the mirror could let me see only till his torso. We drove the next hour in peace. I had finally moved on from the incident. The empty road and music gave us fun vibes. We saw a gas station oncoming, so we decided to fuel up over there. We filled up the tank and started the engine. My eyes landed on the far right side near the trees. And I saw it again. This time my friend too saw it. It was dark and the road was not very well lit. But from whatever light that fell onto his face, it looked like he bore a freakishly sinister grin. We floored the car and left for good. We never stopped, except for traffic lights if any, or the usual stop signs. And at random points, either of us would spot this creature lurking somewhere around, watching us as we drove past it. My friend's mom was a psychic, and she opined that it must be some sort of a curse or an omen of some kind. We swear that we weren't high, and then she suggested we wear a cross if we were carrying. And luckily we were. We took it out and wore it in such a manner that it was very much visible. But that did not help in any sense. Every once in a while, we could still spot that creature in our route. We decided to not give too much attention to it, for it may be feeding off of it. So we just kept driving and changed the topic. And until that point, it had not even attacked or tried to attack us. It was just getting some sort of satisfaction from our discomfort. A while later, we were so engrossed in our conversation that we completely forgot about it. The feeling of dread had also reduced, and it felt like we were past it. Our remainder of the journey was fine. We did occasionally feel like we spotted it farther than before, but we did our best to not even speak of it. And gradually it kept appearing farther away from us, as if its influence was weakening. We ended up seeing it lesser and lesser and reached the farmhouse safely. And by God's grace, we did not spot it anywhere around the house. This happened to be around 8 to 10 years ago when I worked at a multiplex in my local mall. I worked weekday nights and was responsible for closing up the multiplex before I left. That usually put me walking out to my car around half an hour after the mall closed. I finished up one night, said goodnight to the other coworkers near me, and made for the exit. It was around 1:30 a.m. When I came outside, my car was the only one in the parking lot. I got in my car and pulled out my phone. I was browsing through my messages when I saw a car come into my section of the parking lot from around the corner of the building. It pulled into a spot maybe 80 feet from me and parked. Although a little fishy, I went back to looking at my phone and replying to my messages. Then some motion in my peripheral vision made me look up again. The same car circled around a bit, pulled into another spot, and then stopped. It was kind of strange, but people are strange. I was alert and extremely cautious. I wasn't sure if the driver had noticed me in the parking lot. So for the next few minutes, I pretended to be looking at my phone and quietly kept watching this car as it slowly drove all around the parking lot, picking a random spot, remaining there a few seconds, then moving to another. It was the same pattern. So eventually, I lost interest and went back to reading and replying to texts. When I was finished, I put my phone in my pocket and got ready to leave. I realized the other car was nowhere to be found. I looked in front of me, to the right, to the left, and even in my rearview mirror, and saw nothing. I was surprised because I didn't see it leave. And there was only one exit to this parking lot. And that exit was right in front of my view. Suddenly, my eye catches some movement to the right. I realize it's the same car again, this time pulling into the spot next to me. It came from behind with its headlights off. The entire time it was driving around before, its headlights were on and it was reasonably far away. It startled me and I immediately got a bad feeling, a sort of fight or flight response. I quickly locked the door, threw the car in drive, and gunned it forward. I looked in the rearview mirror as I drove away, and the car just sat there in the spot next to the one I had just been in, with its headlights off, idling. I have no idea what the person or people in the car wanted. It could have been innocent, but their strange behavior and the fact that they approached my car with the headlights off, as if they didn't want me to see them, was concerning and alarming. I am fortunate that nothing like that ever happened again. I went home and spoke to my dad about it. He said that it could have not been some drug mafia, or else I would have been chased outside. One simple logical explanation, and also a mentally relieving one, would be that it was someone who was learning to drive. Although driving at night sounds like a stupid idea, but it made sense because the parking lot is empty at night and there is no risk of running into people. And even I used to forget to keep the headlights switched on at times. I hope that was the case and nothing else. I did report it to the cops since it was my duty as someone who worked in the multiplex. But nothing came off it and life resumed peacefully. And I never encountered the same car ever again. This creepy encounter happened to me in around 2010 when I used to work midnight shifts. This wasn't new for me because I had been doing midnight shifts for a couple of years by then. I would get over with my work at around 2:30 a.m. Then pack up and go to the parking lot in the building's basement by around 3 or 3:30 a.m. It had already been over a year and a half of this routine, and not once had I ever felt unsafe or creeped out. In fact, the late-night staff was quite friendly and felt like a family. One time, when I got off the elevator, there was a guy wearing the maintenance uniform. He was sweeping the floor with a mop. He was not the usual guy that I always saw whenever I got off my shift. Oh, and just so you know, I was good friends with the guards, receptionists, and all of the maintenance people at my building. And it wasn't a huge building. So there were a handful number of people at work, especially for the midnight shift. And over the course of a year, I met almost all of them. I had this habit of bringing them a cup of coffee and a sandwich from our pantry, or sometimes the occasional packed bread from our vending machine. Now when I walked out of the elevator, I saw this dude that was unfamiliar to me. And that wasn't a problem. I mean, at one point almost all were new to me. But whenever the elevator opens, it makes a noise. It's not a loud one, but it is a significant sound. I mean, it is loud enough that every single time, the nearest janitor always turned to see who was coming out. But this dude just continued with his job. I mean, that is a good thing that he was least distracted by it. But was it because he did not want to show his face to me? Now I wasn't sure who this new guy was, and for some reason, I was creeped out by him. Maybe the reason I got creeped out was because I could not see his face. And his shoulder-length black hair was covering it. My heels made a sound as they landed on the floor. But once again, he was least bothered. I said hello in a soft tone, and it seemed like my voice did not even reach him. All this while, his face was just not visible to me. Now there is something about my instincts that I just blindly trust them. So instead of going out of my way and giving him the coffee that I was holding, I decided to walk straight to my car. I wanted to get out of this situation at the earliest. My car was always parked near the center of this parking lot. It was nearly equidistant from the exit and the elevator. Now my car must have been like 100 steps far from me. My heart was racing as I could hear my heels clicking on the floor. Somehow I did not want his attention anymore. And I was speed walking, so the noise was slightly louder than usual. I was telling myself that I was overreacting, but then I also heard a second set of footfalls, apart from mine. My throat had dried. I did not want to or even dare to turn around and see if he was coming behind me. I just walked a little faster than before because I was nearing my car. But as I walked faster, I noticed that whoever was following me walked faster too. I could hear the footsteps right behind me. And they were coming in my direction, maybe a little quicker than me. I turned back to see that he was brisk walking in my direction. I panicked at the sight of his grin. He was slightly below 6 feet, had long unkempt hair, and the eyes of a psychopath. He was a weird grin spread over his face. There is no way to describe it apart from calling it eerie. Before I could notice other details, I observed that he was getting closer to me. So I started to run towards my car. I was quite near to it, and my car has keyless entry. So I just pushed the button and literally jumped inside my car. I pulled the door and shut it close. Then I immediately clicked the remote button to lock the car. The new maintenance guy had reached me in these 5 to 10 seconds. But by then I was inside the car, partially safe. Now as I switched my engine on, he was smiling and trying to open my car door while pressing his face against my window. I pulled my window down by an inch and asked him if he wanted some money to go away. In response, he stopped trying to open the car, bent his knees to reach my height, and then looked dead in my eyes while I waited for him to speak. I asked again if he wanted anything. And that was when his expressionless face stared into my soul and unleashed the creepiest smile in the world. He wasn't saying anything in response. This guy was only smiling and then suddenly tried to open my car. Now, my car is set to go on alarm if the door was locked using the remote and was started from inside. So, I proceeded to start the engine and the alarm went off. To my surprise, the guy stopped trying to open my car's door, stood straight, gave me a salute, and walked away. Mind you, he did not run. He walked towards the exit as if he was least bothered about getting caught. All this while, my alarm was still ringing. After what felt like hours, the building guard and the maintenance guy that was usually assigned to my parking floor approached my car. They were surprised to find me inside, the coffee spilled all over me, while I was sobbing hysterically. I told them what had happened, and neither one of them knew who the guy I was describing was. After that incident, there were more guards assigned to the parking areas, doing rounds on an hourly basis. I never saw that guy anymore, and I hope to never see him again. This also made me more careful whenever I go out into any parking area. I always have a can of pepper spray handy, and I added a whistle on my ID lanyard and bag straps for extra precaution. One evening, a couple of my friends and I decided to go out for dinner. We planned to go to this really delicious Chinese restaurant that had opened recently and was quite near to where we live. It had been a really nice time with my buddies, eating lots of food, cracking tons of jokes, and doing the typical senior high school stuff. Including myself, there were a total of 5 of us. 4 girls and 1 guy. The dinner got over, we paid and went out to the parking lot. So when you look at me, I am the least threatening girl you will ever see. I'm about 5 feet 3 inches tall, with fake blonde hair and blue eyes. I wear tons of pink and am just in general very girly looking. I also drive a bright red buggy. Here's the thing though, I used to have huge breasts like K-cup big. And I wasn't overweight or anything, but it's just what God gave me. You can imagine I attracted a lot of unwanted attention from men. Usually harmless, some catcalls, unwanted remarks, stupid jokes, nothing I couldn't just brush off. But what happened that night was by far the creepiest encounter I had ever had. My group and I head out to say our goodbyes when a deaf man comes up to us. Now some backstory to this incident. Out of the 5 of us, 3 of us are fluent in American Sign Language. While in class, our teacher would warn us that there are some people that will fake being deaf to get something from us. She would always tell us that the best way to find out is to obviously just start signing. So this deaf man approaches us and walks over to me. At first he just gestures asking if I have any cigarettes. I just shake my head no and sign sorry. He then walks over to the other girls in my group and asks them. We all say no, and so he walks back over to me and pulls out his wallet. Now at this point, I'm thinking he's asking me to buy him cigarettes. There was a gas station right next to the restaurant where we had our dinner at, so it wasn't an extremely odd request from someone who was deaf. This guy then shows me that he has hundreds of dollars in his wallet and starts to move toward a hotel. This is when I start realizing that this guy isn't just asking a girl who can understand him to help him out by buying some cigarettes. I start signing to him that I don't understand what he is asking for and that I can't help him buy cigarettes because I am only 17. He just kept getting more upset and trying to hand me one of the notes and motioning towards this hotel. I shake my head no. He then goes to propose to my other friends and they all say no as well. Then as my friends and I finally think we can walk away, he grabbed me by my arm. He didn't grab it in a way that he was going to run off with me, but in a way that sounded,
Hey, I am not done with you.
So of course my friends circle around me. He pulls all the money out of his wallet, which must be like $1,000, waves it around the 4 of us girls, and motions to the hotel. At this point, we know he's trying to pay us to go back to the hotel with him for sex. We start to back away and our male friend, trying to be the hero, tries to pull the guy away. This is when we start to think this guy isn't deaf, and he is trying to make women feel bad for him and go have sex with him. He pulls my male friend off to the side and starts gesturing about guns and about the military. Now our male friend knows absolutely nothing about sign language or deaf culture. So obviously this guy was just trying to pay your female friends to have sex with them and is now gesturing a gun to you. My friend was getting nervous. He was looking down at his feet and mumbling, and this guy still reacted perfectly to everything my male friend spoke. Basically, he could hear. We knew that it was more than likely that this guy wasn't actually deaf. We could have been wrong, but I'm willing to bet a lot of money that this guy was faking for some sympathy. The guy then tries to hand our male friend all the money and gestures at us. He shakes his head no, and we all run to jump into my car. Now just as I am about to shut the door, the guy shoves his arm inside my car so that I am unable to close my door. He then looks at me and starts to sign beautiful over and over again. I just sign thank you and try to shove this guy out of my car. He pushes back towards my car and signs beautiful some more time. Then he looks at my male friend and then points at me and signs beautiful once more. My male friend just kinda looks at him because he doesn't understand a thing. At this point, we are scared that this guy is just going to pull me out of the car. So we start getting more aggressive in our body language. My friends all yelled no, and we get this guy to get away from my door. He then tries to walk over to the other side of my car where my male friend is sitting with his door open. He quickly slams his door shut and I lock it. The guy starts just bashing on my windshield with his hands. He was just going nuts, obviously pissed that we won't go back to this hotel with him. He then bangs on the window right next to a male friend and starts signing that he was going to slit his throat and shoot us. At this point, we are all terrified and we hightail it out of that parking lot, only to hear him yelling and cussing at us as we drove away. So, creepy fake deaf man, let's not meet again. My story may not be as scary as you'd expect, but it was still scary. I work at a Walmart store, and this happened to me a year ago. As most people who work in retail stores know, the associates have to park at the end of the parking lot. This is such that the customers can park near and leave happily while we struggle with the long walk after an arduous day. So it's a pretty far walk to the store for us. I am a 25-year-old female, and I was walking in the parking lot on my way to the store to start my shift. I'm walking in the front side of a row of cars when I see a large truck ahead. There was a blonde woman on the driver's side and a man on the passenger side. Might be my gut feeling, but I suddenly got this urge to walk a little farther away from the row of cars, particularly that truck with the couple. So I walked further out in front of it. And as I'm passing by, the man quickly opened his door and leaned about halfway out to catch my attention. He has a yellow card in his hand with something written in Sharpie. He says,
"Hey ma'am, I need to give you something."
He didn't get out of the truck though. He was partially inside with the door propped open and leaning as far out as he could. He said,
"Come over and get this card from me."
I honestly have never felt fear come over me like that. I looked at the woman and she was gripping the steering wheel and watching me. The car was running. I tried to pretend like I never heard anything. The man spoke a little louder this time.
"It's a business card for pressure washing. Just walk over here and collect it. I thought you might be interested."
I looked at him and politely declined. He seemed frustrated and I quickly walked off. I had the worst gut feeling. Something was telling me to get away as quickly as I could. I turned and watched the truck pull off and drive away hastily. Thankfully, nothing happened to it, but it was still scary. Although a few hours later, I was told that a sex trafficker had been arrested at another nearby Walmart, and that too hardly an hour before. My colleague had some pictures sent to him from another coworker working in that Walmart while the cops had arrested him. He was trying to trap two teens who were carrying stuff in front of the store in the car. He asked for help and one of the two girls obliged, while the other carried items to the car. Their dog, who was in the car, started barking frantically, so they let him outside for a moment. He got out and gunned to the truck where the father found his daughter struggling to let loose of the grip of this 40-year-old man. They severely injured him and then handed him over to the cops. I saw those pictures and realized that it wasn't him. But the truck was similar. And the outfit of the dude was also somewhat similar to the guy that had approached me today. I visited the police station to file a report on the guy that had approached me. And the officer informed me that the man that he had caught confessed. He told them a lot of details and tricks that they use to lure women. He mentioned how Walmart is an easy target because he could just ask for help and an unsuspecting woman would come over to help. And they usually have an entire crew to pull off such kidnappings. It looks like the work of one. In my example, he explained how the lady next to him was to help gain your trust. I mean, if a girl is next to him, then he would be safe, which is a very natural assumption. Then he used the paper trick to lure me closer. and there was a possibility that there were 2 or 3 other men hiding somewhere close. Maybe in the cars parked next to the truck, where they silently watched me draw closer. And once I am within their range and their time is right, they would have pounced over me and thrown me in the back of the truck. Then probably drugged me to keep me quiet until I reached their place, where I would be forced to become a sex worker. It sounds extreme to be true, but the cops said that that was the sad reality of such sex trafficking rings. It's an industry, an ugly one per se. The boards on the walls with missing women, men, and children at Walmart are no joke. So many people have gone missing at large stores like Walmart. And I could have been one. I trusted my guts and stayed far. You should always listen to your gut or your inner voice. Those are your survival instincts alerting you. The sketch of the man I saw was almost identical to my memory. But they never caught him. I hope they do catch him and put him behind bars at the earliest. This happened to me a couple of years ago. So I was a 22-year-old girl back then, and I was with my family getting groceries. We just had gotten a new car just a week prior, and the settings were not all adjusted yet. Since it was a standard shopping endeavor, I decided to stay in the car and listen to my favorite music while my family was buying from the store. I falsely assumed that because I couldn't open the car door, no one else could either. But I was wrong. I remember seeing a woman speed walking toward our car. I tried to calm myself by thinking that maybe she just saw something behind the car. That was until she ripped the door open and tried to pull me out of the car. Now that didn't work because I still had the safety belt on. So she tried to get in instead, all while she was talking in a language that I could not understand. At that moment, I was panicking because my false sense of safety was gone, and I was struggling with some woman I didn't understand. All while trying to prevent her from forcing her way into our car. I remember trying to call my mom at the same time and telling her to get the hell back to the car because I needed their help. I couldn't explain given the situation as I was focused more on not letting that woman into our car. My tone alerted my mother that I was not joking. Well, my father still decided it wasn't worth rushing back and calmly finished his purchase because he thought I was just being overdramatic. My mom reached and started panicking instead of helping. She tried to push her away, but she wouldn't budge a bit. Only when my father appeared and pulled that woman back did she calm down and quickly walked away from our car. I was shaking uncontrollably at that point, but I remember noticing her calmly walking toward a man who was standing near the exit of the store. He was just watching, not doing anything. And when she reached him, they just calmly walked off. To this day, I don't know what to make of that encounter. I am still anxious whenever I have to wait alone in a car. I tried to rationalize it somehow, and the best I could come up with was this. During that time, a lot of refugees arrived in my vicinity. So I thought maybe she was traumatized and suffered from PTSD, which got triggered by something, and that was her response. That idea would also work with her overall appearance and her speaking a different language. But the fact that the man just stood there calmly watching still doesn't make sense to me.